So I am very skeptical about lots of things. I'm a very anxious person. I'm always concerned about what is best for my victims and survivors. And as the National Victim Advocate, I got to be okay with what I'm giving out to my people, and all of you out there, you're my people, right? Because we're working all together. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that this is something that you should be utilizing in your organization. Buy it. Statute Finder is definitely something you want to be utilizing in your organizations today. Hello, I'm Carrie Paul, the National Victim Advocate of 13 years. Now what I do is I train advocates, attorneys, and law enforcement across the country. As a consultant and private victim advocate, I work with organizations across the country, about 40 different states, such as End Violence Against Women International, the National Crime Victim Law Institute, and the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma. Over the past 15 years, I've worked with thousands of victims and survivors of crime, and hundreds of law enforcement attorneys and victim advocates. I have trained many law enforcement and attorneys and victim advocates. Basically, there's two pieces to that. There's the conferences where I develop research and present it as workshops. And then there's also smaller trainings where I go to an agency and provide a specific training regarding victim and survivors, and also a variety of webinars. Interesting, because I did see Statute Finder on Instagram, and I read the little blurb in the headline, and I thought, this is interesting. It's nothing like I've ever heard of. As a former victim advocate, when we think of technology, when we hear AI, we get scared because it's typically used against victims and survivors. It's typically something where abusers are using it as a tool to further abuse. So when I saw this, I was excited because it was so different, so promising. And what I found out was, after trying it and having my network try it out, it was different, and it was finally something on our side. The victims and survivors, they're unsure if what is happening to them is abuse, because it might not be the extreme that we see in the media. It's on maybe a different scale, or maybe it's more emotional abuse, or something that they're not really talking about in general with other people. So they don't have this sense of what's going on. Maybe they think it's just a bad relationship. Maybe it's a toxic relationship. So having the ability to use Statute Finder in the other room, when they're getting ready, putting their makeup on, or at the Target drive-up line, you can just put in your situation, and you can see right then and there that your situation does relate to an actual crime. That's something that is going on. It's credible, that what you've been experienced is validated just by seeing it so instantly. And the other piece of that too is, not every victim and survivor can go to an attorney. There's not enough legal aid resources to have that conversation, right? Going across town, making the appointment, waiting, giving all your information, your story to someone you don't even know, and then hearing, okay, it is, but we're limited on what we can do. Now you have that tool in hand to see, okay, this is a crime. So Statute Finder for advocates and organizations and agencies is just amazing. So being a former system-based advocate, and I actually was a volunteer coordinator for my program, I had 21 volunteers. There's never enough advocates for victims and survivors, ever. So for an organization to be able to have this in their capacity, because again, Statute Finder, easy to have Statute Finder pulled up on your computer, your phone, or your work iPad, and have that piece there when you don't have enough people. Right now too, VOCA funding is being cut across the country by 40%. So we may see some agencies losing actual victim advocates. So Statute Finder can be this piece that picks up for the time being, and really should be a fundamental of any program. Why wouldn't you want to have something so accessible and easy and an additional resource to help people? My training as a former system-based victim advocate, I learned everything in the field. So I kind of have a little unique story. I started interning as a victim advocate when I was a freshman in college. And it was supposed to be 6 months to a year. And I loved it so much that I stayed on for 4 years, not being paid. I only left because this was during the recession in 2010. So it was time for me to go get a job and pay those student loans. But for those first 4 years, I earned a lot of internship credit. A lot of my own homework, right, and research became training packets that I created for my agency and then started using throughout the state of Oregon, which is where I'm based. And then I'm taking all that information still and taking it across the country. I'm a private consultant, so I work with law enforcement attorneys and advocates, providing training based off of my research I've done in the past few years. I attend conferences as a public speaker. The national conferences that I've been to within the past few years is End Violence Against Women International, the Crime Victim Law Institute, which is based in Oregon, and the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma. So there's always some hesitation with using something new. Like I said, as a former victim advocate in the system-based area, I worked for my local district attorney's office throughout my career. There was always concern about new information, new agencies, new resources, making sure that they had the best intentions for our victims and survivors. And that's what I really appreciate about StatuteFINDER. It's so important because it's really all about the victim and survivor. There is no cost to it. There's nothing where you have to use it a certain way. It's just very fundamentally for the victim and survivor. And a lot of our resources in our system, which a lot of people know, isn't that way. It's always thinking about funding and grants and whose project it is. This may be Raphael's, baby, right? But it's not something where anyone is profiting from. And that's what I really enjoy about it. This is nonprofit. It's a free resource, and there's no way it's going to go anywhere. So if you get hooked like I have, it's here to stay. I'm thinking back to my days when I was the volunteer coordinator. If I had StatuteFINDER then, what I would have done is I would have selected a couple of my volunteers that were comfortable on the computer and had them use this with the victims and survivors that they would meet on a daily basis. I know organizations, especially systems-based, are concerned about retaining information from victims and survivors. So you don't really have to do that. It could be as simple as opening a notebook and jotting down notes. I worked with one person today. It could be simple as opening up a shared document and just putting down notes for the date and time. It could be survivor A, B, C. There's a lot of always concern about confidentiality too. And that's what's nice about StatuteFINDER is you don't need to log anything. You can even have the option to clear any information that is entered from the advocate speaking with the survivor. I mean, really, this piece is it's such a genuine product. There isn't any concern. And I got to tell everyone out there, so there's never going to be enough for attorneys within legal aid to help everyone that needs assistance. I can tell you definitely in my part of the country, there's just never going to be enough services. So having StatuteFINDER available to get the ball rolling for victims and survivors is huge. So another piece to StatuteFINDER is I really like the feature where you can look up information about protective orders. When I was still a victim advocate with the district attorney's office, we had this piece where we assisted people, anybody. It didn't have to be someone who's a victim of a crime, anyone who needed a protective order. So this is great because you can see it in real time, the information you need, where to go, and what to expect when you actually go and apply for that protective order. So victims and survivors, they could easily go to the court webpage and see the information that they need about where to go, parking and whatnot, but StatuteFINDER gives you that additional piece of knowing that abuse occurred, right? That something did happen, that the experiences that you've experienced are valid, that they are even something that could be considered criminal. Having that additional piece where you can say, okay, this is the abuse, this is what I saw online, and then taking it and being prepared to write it in your protective order, because a lot of people don't realize too, when you're going to apply for a protective order, you have to be prepared to tell your story, the abuse that happened. You're going to tell it in writing, and then with a court advocate if the agency has one, and then again to the judge and the judge's assistant if necessary. The language of the criminal justice system is just, it's nuts. And I'm telling you, as a person who's been in that system for all those years, what we have experienced as survivors and victims and advocates, hearing the story of the person, trying to translate it over to the court, that's another obstacle to face. So having the actual codes from StatuteFINDER makes sense. So you have your experience, you're writing the abuse that happened, and you can translate it quickly to these codes so the judge can see it and then make their best decision into granting it is just amazing. So since I've become a consultant and a private victim advocate, what has been brought to my attention is how horrible family court is. I've worked with so many survivors this past few years about the system itself, individuals. It's not set up to assist victims and survivors. So having this piece, having StatuteFINDER, it can help them actually write what they need to say in these hearings. And these hearings are important. These are hearings where people are going and presenting evidence of abuse for themselves and also their children. So having this additional piece of StatuteFINDER, telling them what's going on, being able to translate to the judge, puts them in a better position of gaining or keeping custody of their children. And as we know from studies, we don't want the children of domestic violence abusers with them, because that's another tool that they use. They use the children as tools to continue to abuse their former partners. So we want everything that we can to keep those children with the survivors. Okay, that's good.